Okay. Background and history. The Federalist Papers is a collection of 85 articles and essays written by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay under the collective pseudonym Publius Public Supermarkets. Publius. Is that how you pronounce it? I'm curious, actually.
I haven't been anyplace.
Is it Publius or Publius?
So make sure to stay tuned to the channel if you enjoy learning
I hate
about
this
those.
stupid fucking channel.
In English it is said as Publius.
Publius?
Publius, it's easy. While in Latin that would be said more as Publius. But
Publius. Publius. We're gonna go with Publius. Wait, you had a website for this. True, we did.
This is a way of learning how we might differ from Publius, which is just fine.
Publius. Publius it is. Term about the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. The collection was commonly known as the Federalist until the name, the Federalist Papers, emerged in the 20th century. The first 77 of these essays were published serially in the independent journal, the New York Packet, and the Daily Advertiser between October 1787 and April of 1788. A compilation of these 77 essays and 8 others were published in 2 volumes as The Federalist, a collection of essays written in favor of the new Constitution as agreed upon by the Federal Convention, September 17th, 1787. Holy shit, they were already naming their books like post-rock albums. By publishing firm J. and A. McLean in March and May 1788. The last 8 papers, numbers 78 through 85, were republished in the New York newspapers between June 14th and August 16th, 1788. The authors of The Federalist intended to influence the voters to ratify the Constitution. In Federalist number 1, they explicitly set that debate in broad political terms. In Federalist number 10, okay, we don't need to go through these because we'll read them. The Federal Convention, the Constitutional Convention, sent the proposed Constitution to the Confederation Congress, which in turn submitted it to the states for ratification at the end of September 1787. On September 27, 1787, Cato first appeared in the New York press criticizing the proposition. Brutus followed on October 18, 1787. Do you think all these guys, when they were writing to the fucking newspapers, do you think they were all wearing the fucking, the Guy Fawkes masks? Actual fucking losers. These and other articles and public letters critical of the new Constitution would eventually become known as the Anti-Federalist Papers. In response, Alexander Hamilton decided to launch a measured defense and extensive explanation of the proposed Constitution to the people of the state of New York. He wrote in Federalist number 1 that the series would endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all of the objections which shall have made their appearance that may seem to have any claim to your attention. Hamilton recruited collaborators for the project. He enlisted John Jay, who, after 4 essays, fell ill and contributed only 1 more essay, Loser. Jay also distilled his case into a pamphlet in the spring of 1788 and addressed to the people of the state of New York. Hamilton cited it approvingly in Federalist number 85. James Madison, president of New York, as a Virginia delegate to the Confederation Congress, was recruited by Hamilton and Jay and became Hamilton's primary collaborator. Governor Morris and William Duer were also considered. However, Morris turned down the invitation and Hamilton rejected 3 essays written by Duer. Duer, I don't know if I'm probably this right. Duer later wrote in support of the 3 Federalist authors under the name Philo or Philo Publius, meaning either friend of the people or friend of Hamilton, based on Hamilton's pen name, Publius. Hamilton chose the pseudonym name Publius, while many other pieces representing both sides of the constitutional debate were written under Roman names. Historian Albert Furtwängler, Jesus, contends that Publius was a cut above Caesar or Brutus or even Cato. At the time of publication, the authors of the Federalist Papers attempted to hide their identities due to Hamilton and Madison having attended the convention. Astute observers, however, correctly discerned the identities of Hamilton, Madison, and Jay, establishing authorial authenticity of the essays that constitute the Federalist Papers has not always been clear. After Hamilton's death in 1804, a list emerged claiming that he alone had written 2/3 of the Federalist essays. Some believe that several of these essays were written by Madison. The scholarly detective work of Douglas Adair in 1944 postulated the following assignments of authorship, corroborated in 1964 by a computer analysis of the text. Federalist Papers were written to support the ratification of the Constitution, specifically in New York. Whether they succeeded in that mission is questionable. Separate ratification proceedings took place in each state, and the essays were not reliably reprinted outside of New York. Furthermore, by the time the series was well underway, a number of important states had already ratified it, for instance, Pennsylvania on December 12th. New York held out until July 26th. Certainly, the Federalist was more important there than anywhere else, but Furtwängler argues that it could hardly rival other major forces in the ratification contest. Specifically, these forces included the personal influence of well-known Federalists, for instance, Hamilton and Jay, and anti-Federalists, including Governor George Clinton. Further, by the time New York came to a vote, 10 states had already ratified the Constitution and had thus already passed. Only 9 states had to ratify it for the new government to be established. Among them, the ratification by Virginia, the 10th state, placed pressure on New York to ratify. In light of that, Furtwängler observes, New York's refusal would make that state an odd outsider. Only 19 Federalists were elected to New York's ratification convention, compared to the anti-Federalists' 46 delegates. While New York did indeed ratify the Constitution on July 26th, the lack of public support for pro-Constitution Federalists has led historian John Kaminsky to suggest that the impact of the Federalists on New York citizens was negligible. As for Virginia, which ratified the Constitution only at its convention on June 25th, Hamilton writes in a letter to Madison that the collected edition of the Federalist had been sent to Virginia. Furtwängler presumes that it was an act as a debater's handbook for the convention there, though he claims that this indirect influence would be a dubious distinction. Okay, some background. Do I want a note for every single paper, or do I just want... Or should I just put them all on one big note? Let's see. Oh, we could do 10 of these per day, probably. Maybe? Yeah, fuck it, why not? Fuck, how did you make a... What's this? Okay. Well, I guess I'll just note important things, I guess. Okay. As we read these, I'll try to break down concepts that I understand, and we'll look at things we don't understand. I'll probably just try to explain paragraph by paragraph, okay? For why these things are important, my U.S. history knowledge is not that great. Anything that I learned before this year, actually, we'll just say is not that great. But I believe there was a constitutional convention in the United States where a constitution was drafted with the intention of creating a strong federal government that would be more able to govern, basically, than what we had prior to that, which was the Articles of Confederation. A lot of people attended these constitutional conventions, and then the convention, and then afterwards, the goal was you needed all the states to ratify. Well, not all of them. You only needed, what did I say, 9 of them, to ratify the Constitution, saying, okay, fine, we'll all be part of a bigger country, basically. And part of the people that were at, or some of the people that were at that constitutional convention are the authors of a lot of these Federalist Papers. The reason why what they write in the Federalist Papers is important is twofold. One reason can be important, and it's what everybody cites, but I actually think it's the minor reason. And then there's a second incredibly important reason, okay? The first reason that people cite is because it gives you some insight into what they felt and what they thought and what their intention was when they were writing the Constitution. This is like interesting, I think, to know. It's like, okay, cool. And it's what usually people say, don't you want to know what they thought when they wrote it? The second point that I think is far more interesting is that the federal government that we have in the United States and the way that our government is formed, okay, was not by random chance and not by organic evolution out of pre-existing structures. It was a bunch of people that came together that studied the prior governments, the prior republics, the prior democracies, and they saw what worked and they saw what didn't work. And from these ideas, they tried to put together a government that kept like the strongest parts of a strong and vigorous king and executive, and the strongest parts of like a debating republic that represents the people, and the strongest parts of like of all these different things to put together a government that worked as effectively as possible. Something that was like powerful but still guaranteed individual rights. Something that could function as a federal government without infringing on the state's ability to operate. Right. Nothing in our government is there randomly or by chance. And whatever lessons from history these guys learned, in the 18th century are still there for us to learn. It's not like we've discovered or radically revamped our view of how, the Romans or the Greeks or, the British governed or whatever, or at least that's my understanding is we haven't. So it's good to, even not as like a U.S. history course, it's just good to understand like, oh, these are how other governments have functioned. These are why things are done as they are in our government. It's not random. There's reasons why. But yeah. Okay. Okay. The first author is Alexander Hamilton, Federalist number 1. To the people of the state of New York, after an unequivocal experience of the inefficiency of the subsisting federal government, you are called upon to deliberate on a new constitution for the United States of America. The subject speaks its own importance, comprehending in its consequences nothing less than the existence of the Union, the safety and welfare of the parts of which it is composed, the fate of an empire in many respects the most interesting in the world. This is a very, also, keep in mind when this is being written, this is a very presumptuous statement because the United States means fuck all to the world right now. It's a colony in the Americas. They had a big Revolutionary War that a bunch of other people got drowned. This is a pretty presumptuous statement, right? Who the fuck are you? America? Okay. It has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question of whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. Oh my God. Damn, it feels like I pre-read this. But yes, so they're coming together to form an explicit government, not just like randomly like, oh, well, this guy's a king or these guys are nobles and this is kind of what they're doing. It's not what we're doing, right? It's like, can we come together and think up? Can we theory craft the perfect government, right? Can we theory craft a really good government? If there be any truth in the remark, the crisis at which we are arrived may with propriety be regarded as the era in which that decision is to be made, and a wrong decision of the part we shall act may, in this view, deserve to be considered as the general misfortune of mankind. If we fuck up, maybe this is the only time somebody can sit down and make a whole government, and if we fuck it up, no one's going to do it in the future. And they did. We did make a good government. We were the world leader for a long time, until maybe 5 days ago. This idea will add the inducements of philanthropy to those of patriotism to heighten the solicitude which all considerate and good men must feel for the event. Basically, we should all be interested, I think, in the outcome of this, right? Happy will it be if our choice should be directed by a judicious estimate of our true interests, unperplexed and unbiased by considerations not connected with the public good. We're doing these things not to make an aristocracy? And that's an aristocratic government, not an oligarchy, not a monarchy, but something for the public good, for the public. But this is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. The plan offered to our deliberations affects too many particular interests, innovates upon too many local institutions, not to involve in its discussion a variety of objects foreign to its merits, and of views, passions, and prejudices little favorable to the discovery of truth. Man, what a guy. This is a thing more ardently to be wished than seriously to be expected. It takes a lot of work to build a good government, right? Like, are you really going to make, like, you want to make a government that represents the public interests of all the different people? Like, yeah, keep dreaming, dipshit. Like, you really expect this to ever happen? Is essentially what he's saying here, right? There's way too many interests involved. You're trying to change way too many local institutions. Like, there's no, like, you really think that these types of discussion will lead you to the discovery of truth? Huh, interesting. That's why people don't really realize this, but Alexander Hamilton was one of the guys that first came out against Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. Did you know that? Among the most formidable of the obstacles which the new Constitution will have to encounter may readily be distinguished the obvious interest of a certain class of men in every state, in every state to resist all changes which may hazard a diminution of the power, emolument, and consequence of the offices they hold under the state establishments, and the perverted ambition of another class of men who will either hope to aggrandize themselves by the confusions of their country, or will flatter themselves with fairer prospects of elevation from the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies than from its union under one government, right? So, what's going to fuck us up when we're trying to make a new constitution, right? Well, obviously, it's going to be the people who are already holding a lot of power who are going to have to give some of that power up, right? Which you do. As a state, you're going to have to give some power up to a new federal government. That's why a lot of people don't want to join a federal government. Fuck you. You're going to come and, wow, we just fought a revolutionary war against the King Britain, and now you want to make a king federal government? What a horrible idea, right? Some people would have to give up power. Other people might be capitalizing on the separation of our states into different things, and they can have, because of the subdivision of the empire into several partial confederacies, they might have more power than they would under a unionized federal government, right? It is not, however, my design to dwell upon observations of this nature. I am well aware that it would be disingenuous to resolve indiscriminately the opposition of any set of men, merely because their situations might subject them to suspicion, into interested or ambitious views. He's not just trying to write people's opinions off immediately, right? It would be disingenuous to try to say immediately, oh, obviously you're against me, right? Oh, so he's saying I have to argue for this, right? He's saying, listen, you obviously want to hold on to your power. Obviously, you're interested in that. But he's saying, but listen, I understand that. I'm not going to discount your arguments just because of that, right? I'm going to engage with the subject matter. We'll engage with the material, right? Candor will oblige us to admit that even such men may be actuated by upright intentions, and it cannot be doubted that much of the opposition which has made its appearance, or may hereafter make its appearance, will spring from sources, blameless at least, if not respectable, the honest errors of minds led astray by preconceived jealousies and fears. People might have like good incentives to be evil, but they also could just be like wrong. They could be fucked up. They might be incorrect about things. People make mistakes. Even people who are predisposed to gain from not having a federal government could still make really good arguments for why we wouldn't have a federal government. So numerous indeed and so powerful are the causes which serve to give a false bias to the judgment that we, upon many occasions, see wise and good men on the wrong as well as on the right side of questions of the first magnitude to society. This circumstance, if duly attended to, would furnish a lesson of moderation to those who are ever so much persuaded of their being in the right in any controversy. So listen, anybody can fuck up, and maybe that means you should like chill a little bit, have a little bit less conviction, be a little bit less 100% sure on a particular thing, because anybody can make a mistake. And a further reason for caution in this respect might be drawn from the reflection that we are not always sure that those who advocate the truth are influenced by purer principles than their antagonists. Different people who are both influenced by good things can come to different conclusions, right? Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives not more laudable than these are apt to operate as well upon those who support as those who oppose the right side of a question. You can be right for the wrong reasons. Were there not even these inducements to moderation, nothing could be more ill-judged than that intolerant spirit which has, at all times, characterized political parties. One thing we'll probably find when reading through these, I don't remember Hamilton particularly, but a lot of the Founding Fathers were not fans of political parties. But for in politics, as in religion, it is equally absurd to aim at making proselytes by fire and sword. Heresies in either can rarely be cured by persecution. You have to change people's minds by arguing against them, not by killing them, right? And yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, and yet, however just these sentiments will be allowed to be, we have already sufficient indications that it will happen in this, as in all former cases of great national discussion. A torrent of angry and malignant passions will be let loose. To judge from the conduct of the opposite parties, we shall be led to conclude that they will mutually hope to evince the justness of their opinions, and to increase the number of their converts by the loudness of their declamations and the bitterness of their invectives. An enlightened zeal for the energy and efficiency of government will be stigmatized as the offspring of a temper fond of despotic power and hostile to the principles of liberty. An over-scrupulous jealousy of danger to the rights of the people, which is more commonly the fault of the head than of the heart, will be represented as mere pretense and artifice, the stale bait for popularity at the expense of the public good. Hold on. Everybody's basically going to be so impassioned about these arguments that it's going to be very easy to conclude the other side is acting with evil, basically, I guess is what. It will be forgotten, on the one hand, that jealousy is the usual concomitant of love, and that the noble enthusiasm of liberty is apt to be infected with a spirit of narrow and illiberal distrust. On the other hand, it will be equally forgotten that the vigor of government is essential to the security of liberty, that in the contemplation of a sound and well-informed judgment, their interest can never be separated, and that a dangerous ambition more often lurks behind the specious mask of zeal for the rights of the people than under the forbidden appearance of zeal for the firmness and efficiency of government. History will teach us that the former has found a much more certain road to the induction of despotism than the latter, and that those men who have overturned the liberties of republics, the greatest number have begun their career by paying an obsequious court to the people, commencing demagogues and ending tyrants. Obsequious court to the people. Is this like a obedient or attentive to the excessive or servile nature? A lot of feelings, emotions, and passions can run hand in hand, like good things and bad things can run hand in hand. There are some people who might use who might use arguments of free speech to spread lies. There might be people who say that they have a mask of zeal for the rights of the people, but there could be a dangerous ambition that's lurking behind that, right? Essentially, yeah. Obsequious. There you go. In the course of the preceding observations, I have had an eye, my fellow citizens, to putting you upon your guard against all attempts from whatever quarter to influence your decision in a matter of the utmost moment to your welfare by any impressions other than those which may result from the evidence of truth. You will, no doubt, at the same time, have collected from the general scope of them that they proceed from a source not unfriendly to the new Constitution. Yes, my countrymen, I own to you that, after having given it an attentive consideration, I am clearly of opinion it is your interest to adopt it. I am convinced that this is the safest course for your liberty, your dignity, and your happiness. He's basically saying, like, yeah, listen, obviously I'm a biased party. Literally a biased party that's writing this. I am in favor of the new Constitution. Just letting you know that right now. Yeah. I affect not reserves, which I do not feel. I will not amuse you with an appearance of deliberation when I have decided. No fake centrism. I frankly acknowledge to you my convictions, and I will freely lay before you the reasons on which they are founded. The consciousness of good intentions disdains ambiguity. I shall not, however, multiply professions on this head. My motives must remain in the depository of my own breast. My arguments will be open to all and may be judged by all. They shall at least be offered in a spirit which will not disgrace the cause of truth. I propose in a series of papers to discuss the following interesting particulars: the utility of the Union to your political prosperity, the insufficiency of the present Confederation to preserve that Union, the necessity of a government at least equally energetic with the one proposed, to the attainment of this object, the conformity of the proposed Constitution to the true principles of republican government, its analogy to your own state constitution, and lastly, the additional security which its adoption will afford to the preservation of that species of government, to liberty, and to prosperity. So basically, the arguments are going to be, your current confederation sucks, okay? I'm going to argue that you have an insufficient present confederation that does not preserve a union that's necessary, that will be able to act as energetically as the one that he's proposing, okay? That the attainment of the current object it coincides with the true principles of republican government, and it's analogous to all of the state constitutions, which the people obviously like. They're the constitution of every state. And then the additional security will be granted basically to the country if everybody adopts the current constitution. It'll make everybody's lives better insofar as that it secures more liberty and prosperity, right? Or property, sorry. In the progress of this discussion, I shall endeavor to give a satisfactory answer to all the objections which shall have made their appearance that may seem to have any claim to your attention. It may perhaps be thought superfluous to offer arguments to prove the utility of the Union, a point, no doubt, deeply engraved on the hearts of the great body of the people in every state, and one which it may be imagined has no adversaries. But the fact is that we already hear it whispered in the private circles of those who oppose the new Constitution that the 13 states are of too great extent for any general system, and that we must of necessity resort to separate confederacies of distinct portions of the whole. So basically, like, I'm sure like a lot of us are thinking like, man, we're a union, you know, we're so cool. We're beating the British and all this cool shit. But I mean, like, in terms of being a strong whole country, I don't know, will all the states be on board with it? Apparently they feel like not everybody is on board with that. This doctrine will, in all probability, be gradually propagated till it has votaries enough to countenance an open avowal of it. For nothing can be more evident to those who are able to take an enlarged view of the subject than the alternative of an adoption of the new Constitution or a dismemberment of the Union. It will therefore be of use to begin by examining the advantages of that Union, the certain evils, and the probable dangers to which every state will be exposed from its dissolution. This shall accordingly constitute the subject of my next address. Okay, so basically, the opening Federalist paper is essentially Hamilton introducing himself as someone who is openly supporting the Constitution. He warns people that many arguments will be made on both sides, both in favor and against, that will be made. I don't just, that's repetitive. Made both in favor and against a stronger union, and to warn against people assuming bad intentions by either side but also to be careful as good things can hide bad intentions. I don't know. It's pretty general, pretty vague, pretty whatever. Okay. Oh, shit. Hold on, my food's here. 1 second. Federalist number 2. Written by John Jay. When the people of America reflect that they are now called upon to decide a question which, in its consequences, must prove one of the most important that ever engaged their attention, the propriety of their taking a very comprehensive as well as very serious view of it will be evident. Nothing is more certain than the indispensable necessity of government, and it is equally undeniable that whenever and however it is instituted, the people must cede to it some of their natural rights in order to vest it with requisite powers. It is well worthy of consideration, therefore, whether it would conduce more to the interest of the to the people of America that they should, to all general purposes, be one nation under one federal government, or that they should divide themselves into separate confederacies and give to the head of each the same kind of powers which they are advised to place in one national government. Basically, right, you have to. In order to have a government with powers, obviously you're ceding some kind of power to the government, obviously, right? It has until lately been a received and uncontradicted opinion that the prosperity of the people of America depended upon their continuing firmly united, and the wishes, prayers, and efforts of our best and wisest citizens have been constantly directed to that object. But politicians now appear who insist that this opinion is erroneous, and that instead of looking for safety and happiness in union, we ought to seek it in a division of the states into distinct confederacies or sovereignties. However extraordinary this new doctrine may appear, it nevertheless has its advocates, and certain characters who were much opposed to it formerly are at present of the number. Obviously, the idea of not forming a union is becoming more popular, and there are big people that are taking up that position. Whatever may be the arguments or inducements which have wrought this change in the sentiments and declarations of these gentlemen, it certainly would not be wise in the people at large to adopt these new political tenets without being fully convinced that they are founded in truth and sound policy. It has often given me pleasure to observe that independent America was not composed of detached and distant territories, but that one connected, fertile, wide-spreading country was the portion of our Western Sons of Liberty. Providence has, in a particular manner, blessed it with a variety of soils and productions, and watered it with innumerable streams for the delight and accommodation of its inhabitants. A succession of navigable waters forms a kind of chain round its borders, as if to bind it together, while the most noble rivers in the world, running at convenient distances, present them with highways for the easy communication of friendly aids and the mutual transportation and exchange of their various commodities. Basically, that even geographically, look at how united we are. With equal pleasure, I have, as often, taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established general liberty and independence. This country and this people seem to have been made for each other, and it appears as if it was the design of Providence that an inheritance so proper and convenient for a band of brethren, united to each other by the strongest ties, should never be split into a number of unsocial, jealous, and alien sovereignties. Similar sentiments have hitherto prevailed among all orders and denominations of men among us. To all general purposes, we have uniformly been one people, each individual citizen everywhere enjoying the same national rights, privileges, and protection. As a nation, we have made peace and war. As a nation, we have vanquished our common enemies. As a nation, we have formed alliances and made treaties and entered into various compacts and conventions with foreign states. A strong sense of the value and blessings of union induced the people at a very early period to institute a federal government to preserve and perpetuate it. They formed it almost as soon as they had a political existence, nay, at a time when their habitations were in flames, when many of their citizens were bleeding, and when the progress of hostility and desolation left little room for those calm and mature inquiries and reflections which must ever precede the formation of a wise and well-balanced government for a free people. It is not to be wondered at that a government instituted in times so inauspicious should on experiment be found greatly deficient and inadequate to the purpose it was intended to answer. It's basically we're talking about how, look, we are all together in this, we're all the same people, we fought against the same enemy, we're doing all this, but we might have formed a government to fight a war. However, the war is going on, some wild shit. We don't know how to make like the best government in times of war. Obviously, we're just trying to survive. This intelligent people perceived and regretted these defects. Still continuing, no less attached to union than enamored of liberty, they observed the danger which immediately threatened the former and more remotely the latter, and being persuaded that ample security for both could only be found in a national government more wisely framed, they, as with one voice, convened the late convention at Philadelphia to take important subject under consideration. This convention, composed of men who possessed the confidence of the people, and many of whom had become highly distinguished by their patriotism, virtue, and wisdom, in times which tried the minds and hearts of men, undertook the arduous task. In the mild season of peace, with minds unoccupied by other subjects, they passed many months in cool, uninterrupted, and daily consultation, and finally, without having been awed by power or influenced by any passions except love for their country, they presented and recommended to the people the plan produced by their joint and very unanimous councils. Admit for so is the fact that this plan is only recommended, not imposed, yet let it be remembered that it is neither recommended to blind approbation nor to blind reprobation, but to that sedate and candid consideration which the magnitude and importance of the subject demand, and which it certainly ought to receive. So a bunch of smart people came together. These people are all patriotic. They are concerned about the well-being of their citizens, and they've put together this plan. They're not telling you have to accept it. They merely ask that you consider it. Don't accept it out of hand. Don't turn it away out of hand. Right? But consider it seriously. But this, as was remarked in the foregoing number of this paper, is more to be wished than expected, that it may be so considered and examined. Experience on a former occasion teaches us not to be too sanguine in such hopes. It is not yet forgotten that well-grounded apprehensions of imminent danger induced the people of America to form the memorable Congress of 1774. That body recommended certain measures to their constituents, and the event proved their wisdom, yet it is fresh in our memories how soon the press began to teem with pamphlets and weekly papers against those very measures. Not only many of the officers of government who obeyed the dictates of personal interest, but others from a mistaken estimate of consequences, or the undue influence of former attachments, or whose ambition aimed at objects which did not correspond with the public good, were indefatigable in their efforts to persuade the people to reject the advice of that patriotic Congress. Many, indeed, were deceived and deluded, but the great majority of the people reasoned and decided judiciously, and happy they are in reflecting that they did so. I don't know any of the, I don't have a well-grounded history of like things that sprung from the 1774 Congress, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't speak to it. Sounds like it was pretty cringe, though. They considered that the Congress was composed of many wise and experienced men. That, being convened from different parts of the country, they brought with them and communicated to each other a variety of useful information. That, in the course of the time they passed together in inquiring into and discussing the true interests of their country, they must have acquired very accurate knowledge on that head. that they were individually interested in the public liberty and prosperity, and therefore that it was not less their inclination than their duty to recommend only such measures as, after the most mature deliberation, they really thought prudent and advisable. So they, okay, just talking about how these guys are wise. They came together, they, thought about things. And they made good recommendations. These and similar considerations then induced the people to rely greatly on the judgment and integrity of the Congress, and they took their advice, notwithstanding the various arts and endeavors used to deter them from it. But if the people at large had reason to confide in the men of that Congress, few of whom had been fully tried or generally known, still greater reason have they now to respect the judgment and advice of the convention, for it is well known that some of the most distinguished members of that Congress, who have been since tried and justly approved for patriotism and abilities, and who have grown old in acquiring political information, were also members of this convention, and carried into it their accumulated knowledge and experience. The people that were part of the first Congress went to the Constitutional Convention. If you trusted them, you should trust them doing the convention, right? It's worthy of remark that not only the first, but every succeeding Congress, as well as the late convention, have invariably joined with the people in thinking that the prosperity of America depended on its union. To preserve and perpetuate it was the great object of the people in forming that convention, and it is also the great object of the plan which the convention has advised them to adopt. Would that propriety, therefore, or for what good general purpose, are attempts at this particular period made by some men to depreciate the importance of the Union? Or why is it suggested that 3 or 4 confederacies would be better than one? I am persuaded in my own mind that the people have always thought right on this subject, and that their universal and uniform attachment to the cause of the Union rests on great and weighty reasons, which I shall endeavor to develop and explain in some ensuing papers. Those who promote the idea of substituting a number of distinct confederacies in the room of the plan of the convention seem clearly to foresee that the rejection of it would put the continuance of the Union in the utmost jeopardy. That certainly would be the case, and I sincerely wish that it may be as clearly foreseen by every good citizen, that whenever the dissolution of the Union arrives, America will have reason to exclaim, in the words of the poet, "Farewell, a long farewell to all my greatness." So I mean, like, this is, we haven't gotten anything specific yet, but like basically, Jay argues that the nation springs from a common background of people who have shared a common struggle and only survived up to this point because of how important a union of all these states was seen as. Argue that the states will only survive a strong federal government moving forward. Federalist number 3. More from John Jay. Oh, these have titles. Wait, do they all have titles? Oh, they do have titles. The same subject continued. Cringe Lord. It is not a new observation that the people of any country, if, like the Americans, intelligent and well-informed, seldom adopt and steadily preserve or persevere for many years in an erroneous opinion respecting their interests. That consideration naturally tends to create great respect for the high opinion which the people of America have so long and uniformly entertained of the importance of their continuing firmly united under one federal government, vested with sufficient powers for all general and national purposes. Okay, so if a country is persevering for a while, it must be because they've adopted some kind of like good idea, I guess. Yeah. The more attentively I consider and investigate the reasons which appear to have given birth to this opinion, the more I become convinced that they are cogent and conclusive. Among the many objects to which a wise and free people find it necessary to direct their attention, that of providing for their safety seems to be the first. The safety of the people, doubtless, has relation to a great variety of circumstances and considerations, and consequently affords a great latitude to those who wish to define it precisely and comprehensively. At present, I mean only to consider it as it respects security for the preservation of peace and tranquility, as well as against dangers from foreign arms and influence, as from dangers of the like kind arising from domestic causes. As the former of these comes first in order, it is proper it should be first discussed. Let us therefore proceed to examine whether the people are not right in their opinion that a cordial union under an efficient national government affords them the best security that can be devised against hostilities from abroad. So the first and most important part of a federal government is to protect you from foreign enemies. Makes sense. The number of wars which have happened or will happen in the world will always be found to be in proportion to the number and weight of the causes, whether real or pretended, which provoke or invite them. If this remark be just, it becomes useful to inquire whether so many just causes of war are likely to be given by united America as by disunited America. For if it should turn out that united America will probably give the fewest, then it will follow that in this respect the Union tends most to preserve the people in a state of peace with other nations. The just causes of war, for the most part, arise either from violation of treaties or from direct violence. America has already formed treaties with no less than 6 foreign nations, and all of them, except Prussia, are maritime and therefore able to annoy and injure us. She has also extensive commerce with Portugal, Spain, and Britain, and, with respect to the two latter, has, in addition, the circumstance of neighborhood to attend to. It is of high importance to the peace of America that she observe the laws of nations towards all these powers, and to me it appears evident that this will be more perfectly and punctually done by one national government than it could be either by 13 separate states or by 3 or 4 distinct confederacies. Because when once an efficient national government is established, the best men in our country will not only consent to serve, but also will generally be appointed to manage it, for, although town or country or other contracted influence may place men in state assemblies or senates or courts of justice or executive departments, yet more general and extensive reputation for talents and other qualifications will be necessary to recommend men to offices under the national government, especially as it will have the widest field for choice and never experience that want of proper persons which is not uncommon in some of the states. So basically, that if we want a state of wars, we'd have a better chance if we had just one territory managing treaties rather than like a bunch of different territories with a bunch of different treaties, and that hopefully a federal government will call upon it more qualified people than just individual state governments because it's a wider government, and so these people will be more qualified to make these treaties, etc. All this. Hence, it will result that the administration, the political councils, and the judicial decisions of the national government will be more wise, systematical, and judicious than those of individual states, and consequently more satisfactory with respect to other nations, as well as more safe with respect to us. Music? There you go. Because, under the national government, treaties and articles of treaties, as well as the laws of nations, will always be expounded in one sense and executed in the same manner, whereas adjudications on the same point and questions in 13 states, or in 3 or 4 confederacies, will not always accord or be consistent, and that, as well from the variety of independent courts and judges appointed by different and independent governments, as from the different local laws and interests which may affect and influence them. The wisdom of the convention in committing such questions to the jurisdiction and judgments of courts appointed by and responsible only to one national government cannot be too much commended. Okay. Let's just sum this. Jay argues that having a national unified government produces better environments for its people The first argument concerning peace. He argues that one national government has more capability and uniformity in accepting and enforcing treaties than multiple governments would, therefore maintaining greater periods of peace for the citizens. Because the prospect of present loss or advantage may often tempt the governing party in one or two states to swerve from good faith and justice, but those temptations, not reaching the other states, and consequently having little or no influence on the national government, the temptation will be fruitless, and good faith and justice be preserved. The case of the Treaty of Peace with Britain adds great weight to this reasoning. Because, even if the governing party and a state should be disposed to resist such temptations, yet as such temptations may, and commonly do, result from circumstances peculiar to the state, and may affect a great number of the inhabitants, the governing party may not always be able, if willing, to prevent the injustice mediated, or to punish the aggressors. But the national government, not being affected by those local circumstances, will neither be induced to commit the wrong themselves, nor want power or inclination to prevent or punish its commission by others. So basically that even if one state could benefit greatly by doing something that would be bad for all the other states, a national government would kind of curtail the interests of the individual states, basically, right? So far, therefore, as either designed or accidental violations of treaties and the laws of nations afford just causes of war, they are less to be apprehended under one general government than under several lesser ones, and in that respect, the former most favors the safety of the people. States would also serve to balance each other's interests in a national government. As to those just causes of war which proceed from direct and unlawful violence, it appears equally clear to me that one good national government affords vastly more security against dangers of that sort than can be derived from any other quarter. Because such violences are more frequently caused by the passions and interests of a part than of the whole, of one or two states than of the Union, not a single Indian war has yet been occasioned by aggressions of the present federal government, feeble as it is, but there are several instances of Indian hostilities having been provoked by the improper conduct of individual states who, either unable or unwilling to restrain or punish offenses, have given occasion to the slaughter of many innocent inhabitants. The neighborhood of Spanish and British territories, bordering on some states and not on others, naturally confines the causes of quarrel more immediately to the borderers. The bordering states, if any, will be those who, under the impulse of sudden irritation and a quick sense of apparent interest or injury, will be most likely, by direct violence, to excite war with these nations, and nothing can so effectually obviate that danger as a national government whose wisdom and prudence will not be diminished by the passions which actuate the parties immediately interested. Basically that like some states may be driven to violent conduct or be driven to immediate action because of a state's unique interest or specific interest, but a federal government would basically help to curtail or stop, I guess, a single state from driving everybody into war, basically. But not only fewer just causes of war will be given to the national government, but it will also be more in their power to accommodate and settle them amicably. Amicably. They will be more temperate and cool, and in that respect, as well as in others, will be more in capacity to act advisedly than the offending state. The pride of states, as well as of men, naturally disposes them to justify all their actions and opposes their acknowledging, correcting, or repairing their errors and offenses. The national government in such cases will not be affected by this pride, but will proceed with moderation and candor to consider and decide on the means most proper to extricate them from the difficulties which threaten them. Besides, it is well known that acknowledgments, explanations, and compensations are often accepted as satisfactory from a strong united nation, which would be rejected as unsatisfactory if offered by a state or confederacy of little consideration or power. In the year 1685, the state of Genoa, having offended Louis XIV, endeavored to appease him, he demanded that they should send their doge, or chief magistrate, accompanied by 4 of their senators, to France to ask his pardon and receive his terms. They were obliged to submit to it for the sake of peace. Would he, on any other occasion, either have demanded or have received the like humiliation from Spain or Britain or any other powerful nation? Wow. A unified government can cool and temper the individual interests of the state and also represent a stronger bargaining peace against foreign friend and foe alike. Okay, I'm only going to do 5 of these a day, okay? I think. Okay. Federalist 4, author John Jay. Will you share these notes? Literally everything is published on my website. I think it's destiny.gg/notes. The same subject continued. Man, he's obsessed with this. Wow, Crane Shield, thanks for the 5 gifted subs. My last paper assigned several reasons why the safety of the people would be best secured by union against the danger it may be exposed to by just causes of war given to other nations, and those reasons show that such causes would not only be more rarely given, but also would be more easily accommodated by a national government than either by the state governments or the proposed little confederacies. But the safety of the people of America against dangers from foreign force depends not only on their forbearing to give just causes of war to other nations, but also on their placing and continuing themselves in such a situation as not to invite hostility or insult, for it need not be observed that there are pretended as well as just causes of war. It is too true, however disgraceful it may be to human nature, that nations in general will make war whenever they have a prospect of getting anything by it. Nay, absolute monarchs will often make war when their nations are to get nothing by it for the purposes and objects merely personal, such as thirst for military glory, revenge for personal affronts, ambition, or private compacts to aggrandize or support their particular families or partisans. These and a variety of other motives, which affect only the mind of the sovereign, often lead him to engage in wars not sanctioned by justice or the voice and interests of his people. Hold on. This paper is arguing and protecting the nation from just causes of war. This essay argues against protecting the nation from unjust, pretend causes of war. These and a variety of other motives, which affect only the mind of the sovereign, often lead him to engage in wars not sanctified by justice or the voice and interests of his people. But independent of these inducements of war, which are more prevalent in absolute monarchies, but which well deserve our attention, there are others which affect nations as often as kings, and some of them will, on examination, be found to grow out of our relative situation and circumstances. Wouldn't you state when referring to these nations to be referring to a group of people in these contexts? They're calling it a national government. What are you talking? I'm just... complain to him. Okay. Fuck, where was I? Okay. With France and with Britain, we are rivals in the fisheries and can supply their markets cheaper than they can themselves, notwithstanding any efforts to prevent it by bounties on their own or duties on foreign fish. With them and with most other European nations, we are rivals in navigation and the carrying trade, and we shall deceive ourselves if we suppose that any of them will rejoice to see it flourish. With them and with most other European nations, we are rivals in navigation and the carrying trade. We shall deceive ourselves if we suppose that any of them will rejoice to see it flourish. For, as our carrying trade cannot increase without in some degree diminishing theirs, it is more their interest and will be their policy to restrain than to promote it. In the trade to China and India, we interfere with more than one nation, inasmuch as it enables us to partake in advantages which they had in a manner monopolized, and as we thereby supply ourselves with commodities which we used to purchase from them. Basically talking about how, like, as we become bigger players in like global trade, other people are going to get mad at us, obviously, and they're going to want to blow our ships up, basically, right? The extension of our own commerce in our own vessels cannot give pleasure to any nations who possess territories on or near this continent, because the cheapness and excellence of our productions, added to the circumstance of vicinity and the enterprise and address of our merchants and navigators, will give us a greater share in the advantages which those territories afford than consist with the wishes or policy of their respected sovereigns. Spain thinks it convenient to shut the Mississippi against us on the one side, and Britain excludes us from the St. Lawrence on the other. Nor will either of them permit the other waters which are between them and us to become the means of mutual intercourse and traffic. From these and such like considerations, which might, if consistent with prudence, be more amplified and detailed, it is easy to see that jealousies and uneasiness may gradually slide into the minds and cabinets of other nations, and that we are not to expect that they should regard our advancement in union, in power, and consequence by land and by sea, with an eye of indifference and composure. The people of America are aware that inducements to war may arise out of these circumstances, as well as from others not so obvious at present, and that whenever such inducements may find fit time and opportunity for operation, pretenses to color and justify them will not be wanting. Basically, like, listen, if people want to go to war with us because they want like trade or some bullshit, they'll always find a reason to do it, just or otherwise. Wisely, therefore, do they consider union and a good national government as necessary to put and keep them in such a situation as, instead of inviting war, will tend to repress and discourage it. The situation consists in the best possible state of defense and necessarily depends on the government, the arms, and the resources of the country. As the safety of the whole is the interest of the whole, and cannot be provided for without government, either one or more or many, let us inquire whether one government is not, relative to the object in question, more competent than any other given number whatever. Other countries would probably grow unhappy with the growth of America's shipping and fishing industry, as a given example, and a unified federal government would discourage parties from engaging in warfare against the U.S., springing from these jealousies. One government can collect and avail itself of the talents and experience of the ablest men. Yeah, so even they like ableism. in whatever part of the Union they may be found. It can move on uniform principles of policy. It can harmonize, assimilate, and protect the several parts and members, and extend the benefits of its foresight and precautions to each. In the formation of treaties, it will regard the interest of the whole, and the particular interests of the parts as connected with that of the whole. In the formation of treaties, it will regard the interests of the whole, and the particular interests of the parts as connected with that of the whole. It can apply the resources and power of the whole to the defense of any particular part, and that more easily and expeditiously than state governments or separate confederacies can possibly do, for want of concert and unity of system. Basically, a federal government can respond with any particular instance better than like a whole bunch of confederacies or states can, right? It can place the militia under one plan of discipline, and by putting their officers in a proper line of subordination to the chief magistrate, will, as it were, consolidate them into one corps, and thereby render them more efficient than if divided into 13 or into 3 or 4 distinct independent companies. What would the militia of Britain be if the English militia obeyed the government of England, if the Scotch militia obeyed the government of Scotland, and if the Welsh militia obeyed the government of Wales? Suppose an invasion, would those 3 governments, if they agreed at all, be able, with all their respective forces, to operate against the enemy so effectually as the single government of Great Britain would? We have heard much of the fleets of Britain, and the time may come, if we are wise, when the fleets of America may engage attention. But if one national government had not so regulated the navigation of Britain as to make it a nursery for seamen, if one national government had not called forth all the national means and materials for forming fleets, their prowess and their thunder would never have been celebrated. Let England have its navigation and fleet. Let Scotland have its navigation and fleet. Let Wales have its navigation and fleet. Let Ireland have its navigation and fleet. Let those 4 of the constituent parts of the British Empire be under 4 independent governments, and it is easy to perceive how soon they would each dwindle into comparative insignificance. Apply these facts to our own case. Leave America divided into 13, or, if you please, into 3 or 4 independent governments. What armies could they raise and pay? What fleets could they ever hope to have? If one was attacked, would the others fly to its succor? Succor, right? Wait.
Hey, if you're a sucker for well-designed aesthetic productivity things like me.
Good one. Good one. Wait, how do you go to the next?
This is really, really good. I'll put a link in the video description.
That he might know how to succor us according to our infirmities. Let me share 2 areas.
Have the power
Oh, is it succor?
to heal, comfort, restore, succor, strengthen, console.
And he will be given succor by a magical cow.
Yeah. Yeah. True. Would the others fly to its succor and spend their blood and money in its defense? Would there be no danger of their being flattered into neutrality by its specious promises, or seduced by a too great fondness for peace to decline hazarding their tranquility and present safety for the sake of neighbors, of whom perhaps they have been jealous, and whose importance they are content to see diminished? Although such conduct would not be wise, it would nevertheless be natural. The history of the states of Greece and of other countries abounds with such instances, and it is not improbable that what has so often happened would, under similar circumstances, happen again. Jay argues that a divided government among several confederacies would be ineffective at responding to foreign threats, as divided states would be too tempted to maintain their neutrality and too unwilling to shed blood in defense of another party. I think he's referencing the Peloponnesian War. Yeah, he might be. I'm sure there's a lot of wars that things like this happened, right? But admit that they might be willing to help the invaded state or confederacy. How and when and in what proportion shall aids of men and money be afforded? Who shall command the allied armies, and from which of them shall he receive his orders? Who shall settle the terms of peace, and in case of disputes, what umpire shall decide between them and compel acquiescence? Various difficulties and inconveniences would be inseparable from such a situation, whereas one government, watching over the general and common interests and combining and directing the powers and resources of the whole, would be free from all these embarrassments and conduce far more to the safety of the people. But whatever may be our situation, whether firmly united under one national government or split into a number of confederacies, certain it is that foreign nations will know and view it exactly as it is, and they will act toward us accordingly. If they see that our national government is efficient and well administered, our trade prudently regulated, our militia properly organized and disciplined, our resources and finances discreetly managed, our credit our credit reestablished, our people free, contented, and united, they will be much more disposed to cultivate our friendship than provoke our resentment. If, on the other hand, they find us either all of this, by the way, as you're going up or down through like levels of government, all of this applies to international treaties as well, right? Or international agreements as well, and then down to local governments as well, right? That if you have like a united government, if you've got a united NATO, EU, whatever, and people look at that, they're way less likely to fuck with you because they know that inviting conflict with one invites conflict with the whole. But if they see you as kind of divided amongst yourselves, as not unified amongst yourselves, then they think that they can pick apart or fight with just like particular members of your organization or whatever, and not induce, I guess, the wrath of the entirety of the body, right? If, on the other hand, they find us either destitute of an effectual government, each state doing right or wrong as to its rulers may seem convenient, or split into 3 or 4 independent and probably discordant republics or confederacies, one inclining to Britain, another to France, and a third to Spain, and perhaps played off each other by the 3, what a poor, pitiful figure will America make in their eyes? How liable would she become not only to their contempt, but to their outrage, and how soon would dear-bought experience proclaim that when a people or family so divide, it never fails to be against themselves. True. Is befaux, is that a befriend versus befoe someone? Is that not a word? Did I just make that up? Let's see. Wait. Conquer? Is that right? I don't think I'm spelling right. Okay. Publius. Loser.
Greetings.
Oh, hi, what's up?
Are you busy right now, brother?
No, one more Federalist paper to go for today, but what's up? What do you got for us?
Okay. I say the problem is resolved, okay?
Okay.
Problem is resolved. But beyond that, I wanted to ask a kind of weird question. If I was to try and get into like all of this legal mumbo jumbo with the fucking DOJ shit or whatever, do you have a recommendation for a place that I would start?
What specifically are you looking to
Like
get into?
specifically interpretations of like legal actions and like Supreme Court decisions and like how these things can be combated or fought in Congress and the powers of like federal courts and shit like that. Like,
Yeah.
how would I even go about?
This is what I would say, okay? If you want to learn something, you have to like, it sounds autistic, but you just need to don't make any inferences. And if you don't know what a thing means, just look up what it means. Like, that's it. I think the biggest hurdle that people have to reading legal stuff is they just try to make inferences to some of the legalese, and then they don't really know what they're, and they try to kind of figure, and then that's it. And then basically what happens is after they've read something, they don't really know any of the smaller like elements of it, and they've kind of inferred from some of the text they've read, and they didn't really learn much from reading it. But if like every time you come across a thing, you're like, oh, what is this? And then you look it up. There are a few, I think Westlaw is a common one. I think Cornell has like a site with a bunch of legal shit. Anytime you come across something you don't know, literally just look it up. That's what I do. Like, it's boring and it's not like a shortcut, but like just look it up. That's what I say. Yeah.
Okay. Okie dokie. How did you get started in down your like legal, like, cause you had like a law arc, right? Where you started looking at
just literally just that. Like, people will call you retarded, but it's literally just that. I just like started looking up like, oh, what's this? Google it. Oh, what's that? Google it. Like, there are streams of me being like, what is like, is the vice presidency office? What does that mean? And so I would Google like the office of vice presidency. Like, what is the difference between like this and then I would like look at this and like, oh, okay, well, what's like the who made this or what's this? And I would just like Google and look at charts and like just this, like just like looking at more information and not making inferences and assuming a thing. Just like if you don't know, just look it up. There's no real shortcut, but if you're willing to do that, like you'll start to get a feel for it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like that makes sense. That tracks with some of the clips or whatever that people try and make fun of you for the what is the Israel-Palestine stuff, where you're like, oh, I don't know what this is or whatever, instead of just
look it up,
bullshitting and acting.
The reality is most people don't know what any of the shit that I'm talking about is or looking it up, but like if they think they should know it and other people seem to know it, they all just kind of like laugh along like they should know it. But in reality, a lot of people don't know a lot of things. But just don't be afraid to like look things up. It's fine. As long as you're not like giving high conviction takes on something you don't know anything about, you're fine. Who cares? Just look it up.
True. Wait, what are these Federalist papers you're going through though?
When the United States was before the United States was formed, I think it was after the Revolutionary War. There were kind of like these very weak articles that were holding together the 13 states into one thing, and the issue was that they think they needed a stronger federal government in order to like be a real country. And so they had like the Constitutional Congress or convention where a bunch of people went to Philadelphia and said like, hey, we should like form a stronger federal government. And then the Federalist Papers were written by a few of the founding fathers who were at that convention, who were trying to make arguments to the people of New York for why they should adopt basically the Constitution and form part of a federal government. Yeah.
Are you just looking this up just cause, or did something prompt this?
They're good to know because a lot of people reference them, but they've never read them before. And there's just a lot of good arguments in here that are instructive on the formation of the government. Like, there's a reason why the government's formed the way that it is. It's not random, and usually the reasons are pretty good.
Oh, is this all kind of a part of the idea that there's a lot of arguments for like 80% of the structure of the United States just doesn't make sense? It's just random bullshit or whatever that a bunch of old dudes decided to be able to chop
Definitely
together.
not true. Definitely not true. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for talking to me, buddy. I'll let you get back to it.
I love you. Be careful, okay?
Okay. Yeah. Bye.
Why did he steal my thing? I don't like that. You don't own that? I absolutely own that.
Did you get baited? As I've been saying a bunch of dog shit.
Cope of... What is this?
Did you get baited? Did you get baited? As I've been saying a bunch of dog shit.
The cope of... I mean... He is. He is a convicted felon. That's not a cope. That's just like a fact. This is where conservatives are at, right? Like, you call it a cope to just state something that's actually true?
Oh, God. No, that's not guys, if every time we had a normal conversation, okay, about an objective topic, and I addressed Disney, hey, hello, sir, are you, oh, okay, yeah, you can talk now, divorced cuck. Hey, divorced cuck, Andy, dumb fuck, fuck my wife guy. Like, dude, like, I understand that it's true. I understand that it has its own validity, but I think there's a place and a time to put labels or whatever. Sometimes you can just kind of address somebody as, like, just their name and move on.
I can't tell if this is difficult to understand or not. It has to do with whether or not it's related to the subject. I'm pretty sure I even said that in that. I don't know if it got clipped or not, but it has to do if it's related to the subject, right? That's the issue. It's not just a random fact. It's if you're running for president and you're a convicted felon, and that convicted felony has to do with election-related fraud, that's the point. Like, okay. Okay. Last one of these for today. Federalist paper number 5. The same subject continued. These might be all the ones from John Jay. Queen Anne, in her letter of the 1st of July, 1706, to the Scotch Parliament, makes some observations on the importance of the union then forming between England and Scotland, which merit our attention. I shall present the public with one or two extracts from it. Quote, an entire and perfect union will be the solid foundation of lasting peace. It will secure your religion, liberty, and property, remove the animosities amongst yourselves, and the jealousies and differences betwixt our two kingdoms. It must increase your strength, riches, and trade, and by this union, the whole island, being joined in affection and free from all apprehensions of different interest, will be enabled to resist all its enemies. End quote. And the next quote. We must earnestly recommend to you calmness and unanimity in this great and weighty affair, that the union may be brought to a happy conclusion, being the only effectual way to secure our present and future happiness, and disappoint the designs of our and your enemies, who will doubtless, on this occasion, use their utmost endeavors to prevent or delay this union. It was remarked in the preceding paper that weakness and divisions at home would invite dangers from abroad, and that nothing would tend more to secure us from them than union, strength, and good government within ourselves. This subject is copious and cannot easily be exhausted. The history of Great Britain is the one with which we are in general the best acquainted, and it gives us many useful lessons. We may profit by their experience without paying the price which it cost them. Although it seems obvious to common sense that the people of such an island should be but one nation, yet we find that they were for ages divided into three, and that those three were almost constantly embroiled in quarrels and wars with one another. Notwithstanding, their true interest with respect to the continental nations was really the same, yet by the arts and policy and practices of those nations, their mutual jealousies were perpetually kept inflamed, and for a long series of years, they were far more inconvenient and troublesome than they were useful and assisting to each other. Basically just obviously the idea that, man, look at these countries. They're all literally on the same fucking island. Why can't they just be one country? Seems like it would make a lot more sense. They'd be stronger for it, right? Yeah. Should the people of America divide themselves into 3 or 4 nations, would not the same thing happen? Would not similar jealousies arise and be in like manner cherished? Instead of their being joined in affection and free from all apprehension of different interests, envy and jealousy would soon extinguish confidence and affection, and the partial interests of each confederacy, instead of the general interests of all America, would be the only objects of their policy and pursuits. Hence, like most other bordering nations, they would always be either involved in disputes and war, or live in the constant apprehension of them. The most sanguine advocates for 3 or 4 confederacies cannot reasonably suppose that they would long remain exactly on an equal footing in point of strength, even if it were possible to form them so at first. But, admitting that to be practicable, yet what human contrivance can secure the continuance of such equality? Basically saying, like, yeah, sure, maybe 3 or 4 different governments could start off and, like, they'd be cool at first, but obviously as time goes on, we're going to fight with each other over something. It always happens, right? Independent of those local circumstances, which tend to beget and increase power in one part and to impede its progress in another, we must advert to the effects of that superior policy and good management, which would probably distinguish the government of one above the rest, and by which their relative equality in strength and consideration would be destroyed. For it cannot be presumed that the same degree of sound policy, prudence, and foresight will uniformly be observed by each of these confederacies for a long succession of years. Some countries might come ahead, some might fall behind, like it would just not work well, right? Whenever and from whatever causes it might happen, and happen it would, that any one of these nations or confederacies should rise on the scale of political importance much above the degree of her neighbors, that moment would those neighbors behold her with envy and with fear. Both those passions would lead them to countenance, if not to promote, whatever might promise to diminish her importance, and would also restrain them from measures calculated to advance or even secure her prosperity. Basically, we would be competing with each other instead of trying to make each other stronger, right? Much time would not only be necessary to enable her to discern these unfriendly dispositions. She would soon begin not only to lose confidence in her neighbors, but also to feel a disposition equally unfavorable to them. Distrust naturally creates distrust, and by nothing is goodwill and kind conduct more speedily changed than by invidious jealousies and uncandid imputations, whether expressed or implied. The North is generally the region of strength, and many local circumstances render it probable that the most northern of the proposed confederacies would, at a period not very distant, be unquestionably more formidable than any of the others. No sooner would this become evident than the northern hive would excite the same ideas and sensations in the most southern parts of America, which it formerly did in the southern parts of Europe. Nor does it appear to be a rash conjecture that its young swarms might often be tempted to gather honey in the more blooming fields and milder air of their luxurious and more delicate neighbors. They who well consider the history of similar divisions and confederacies will find abundant reason to apprehend that those in contemplation would in no other sense be neighbors than as they would be borderers, that they would neither love nor trust one another, but on the contrary would be a prey to discord, jealousy, and mutual injuries. In short, that they would place us exactly in the situation in which some nations doubtlessly wish to see us, viz., formidable only to each other. For these considerations, it appears that these gentlemen are greatly mistaken who suppose that alliances offensive and defensive might be formed between these confederacies and would produce that combination and union of wills, of arms, and of resources which would be necessary to put and keep them in a formidable state of defense against foreign enemies. Jay argues in this essay that the growing strength and that the growing strength in some hives would cause them to invade or steal resources from the others. Should America be 3 or 4 separate governments instead of one unified government? When did the independent states, into which Britain and Spain were formerly divided, combine in such alliance or unite their forces against a foreign enemy? The proposed confederacies will be distinct nations. Each of them would have its commerce with foreigners to regulate by distinct treaties, and as their productions and commodities are different and proper for different markets, so would those treaties be essentially different. Different commercial concerns must create different interests, and of course, different degrees of political attachment to and connection with different foreign nations. Hence, it might and probably would happen that the foreign nation with whom the Southern Confederacy might be at war would be the one with whom the Northern Confederacy would be the most desirous of preserving peace and friendship. An alliance so contrary to their immediate interest would not therefore be easy to form, nor, if formed, would it be observed and fulfilled with perfect good faith. Nay, it is far more probable that in America, as in Europe, neighboring nations acting under the impulse of opposite interests and unfriendly passions would frequently be found taking different sides. Considering our distance from Europe, it would be more natural for these confederacies to apprehend danger from one another than from distant nations, and therefore that each of them should be more desirous to guard against the others by the aid of foreign alliances than to guard against foreign dangers by alliances between themselves. And here, let us not forget how much more easy it is to receive foreign fleets into our ports and foreign armies into our country than it is to persuade or compel them to depart. How many conquests did the Romans and others make in the characters of allies, and what innovations did they, under the same character, introduce into the governments of those whom they pretended to protect? Oh, the Soviets did this as well, right? Let candid men judge, then, whether the division of America into any given number of independent sovereignties would tend to secure us against the hostilities and improper interference of foreign nations. Competition between local confederacies. Confederacies would invite unions, would invite competing unions, or no, agreements, competing alliances with foreign nations, who would then be able to exert more influence over the American confederacies. There you go. Okay. Okay. We'll do 5 more of these tomorrow. We'll try to do 5 a day.